What if I told you that Luffy isn't going to be the one to defeat Imu? While Luffy will of course defeat the final villain, that villain will actually be Blackbeard, after Blackbeard has taken the power of the previous god of the world, Imu. But Blackbeard isn't going to be able to defeat Imu alone. Rather, Oda has been carefully setting up the storylines of 3 characters from decades back to all converge in defeating the King of the Celestial Dragons together, an unlikely alliance between the final member of the Davy clan, the leader of the revolution, and the fallen Celestial Dragon, otherwise known as the God Valley Trio. Because this God Valley flashback wasn't just about establishing Imu as the greatest evil of the world, who even Rocks, Roger, and Garp couldn't overcome. No, this flashback was also the origin story of the trio who one day would be able to topple Imu. The 3 children of God Valley, their destinies each began here. Blackbeard, the son of Rocks, Dragon, the son of Garp, and Shanks, the adopted son of Roger. Their paths all lead back to the same enemy, Imu, to one day do what their fathers couldn't. To fully understand the sequence of events that Oda is weaving together for the finale of One Piece, and how this fated battle is not only perfectly foreshadowed, but also closes out every single major character's storyline perfectly, sit back and listen, because I'm going to be breaking down everything from the start. But first, do you know what I do to stay healthy? Well, staying in shape all starts with what you eat. And I literally never have to worry about my diet because with Factor, I know that all of my dinners are nutritious, taste good, and offer me plenty of variety. Factor is a pre-made meal service. So if you have trouble staying in shape or maintaining a good diet, either because you don't have time to meal prep, or you just have trouble sticking to healthy meals, then Factor is the perfect option for you. Factor will send you meals that are ready in just 2 minutes in the microwave. And Factor offers you tons of great tasting options like pasta, pork, or even steak and shrimp. But the important thing is that everything is actually nutritious, because Factor meals are prepared by chefs and nutritionists. You can make sure that you're ordering calorie smart or even keto if you want, and then you can pick from a bunch of meals that sound good to you. And trust me, Factor dinners genuinely taste really good. Again, these are all prepared by professional chefs, so it feels like you're eating at a restaurant. So if you want to try out Factor just for a week, just head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code MORGEFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus you get free breakfast for 1 year. That's code MORGEFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's valid for any new Factor customers and any qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. So that aside, to begin with, the 3 central figures of the God Valley flashback were Rocks, Roger, and Garp. All 3 of these figures were painted as protagonists, with the true villain of the narrative being Imu. These 3 heroes of the era were brought together when they realized the actual evil that must be fought against. However, of course, Imu ultimately played the trio against one another. God Valley ended in tragedy, with the primary hero of the flashback, Rocks, unable to defeat the big bad villain Imu. Roger and Garp played the roles of the heroes of the narrative in Rocks' stead, but only in a superficial sense. They get a hollow victory against a puppet, while knowing that ultimately the true evil Imu still exists, and holds the world in his clutches. However, that is the point of all One Piece flashbacks, to establish a moment in time where the previous generation experienced tragedy, and even fell short in a way, but passed on a will to their successors so that in the future they can right the wrongs of the past. So looking closely at the God Valley flashback, it wasn't just about the 3 primary protagonists, Rocks, Roger, and Garp. No, wasn't this also the origin point of the stories of 3 other pivotal characters of the modern day? The 3 key children of this flashback were, in order, this celestial dragon baby, who through a twist of fate experiences an elaborate side storyline that ultimately brings him into the care of the Roger pirates instead. Marshall D. Teach, the child over whom the entire God Valley battle began, with Rocks storming the island to save his wife and his son Teach, the child who was forever traumatized by what he experienced at God Valley, but at the same time who managed to escape as the only member of the Davy clan that Imu fails to erase here. And finally, Monkey D. Dragon, the young Navy recruit whose eyes are opened by the God Valley incident to the truth of the world, and who from here on decides to break from the path of the Marines and begin carving out his own path to change. So what we're looking at is God Valley, a story of destiny, centering around 3 protagonists who are brought face to face with the great evil of the world and fail to overcome it, but whose 3 children's storylines are set in motion from the events of the incident. That's right, these 3 children that the flashback also centered around also just just so happen to be the three children of God Valley's three protagonists. Teach is Rox's son, Dragon is Garp's son, and Shanks becomes Roger's adopted son. And of course, these three children go on to become the three most powerful figures in the fight against the world government today, outside of Luffy himself. These groupings aren't random. It's not a coincidence that Rox, Roger, and Garp were specifically framed as the main characters of this flashback, and this flashback also centered around the origin stories of their three children. These three children represent the future, with the story of the flashback coming full circle in the modern day, where Imu will once again face a trio of unlikely allies coming together to defeat him, just as their fathers once did, only this time they will succeed, because they have the keys to defeating Imu that their fathers lacked. But before delving into why Blackbeard, Shanks, and Dragon will be able to succeed where their fathers failed, the biggest question that must first be addressed is, what about Luffy? So why wouldn't Luffy be the one to defeat Imu? I have grappled back and forth with this question of whether Imu or Blackbeard will be the final villain for a long time myself, but recent signs seem to suggest that it is more likely than not that Oda is setting up the sequence of events to be first a team effort defeating Imu, followed by Blackbeard stealing Imu's ability and becoming the final villain, leaving it up to Luffy to defeat Blackbeard as the final battle. As such, while Luffy will not be part of Imu's defeat, that is because Imu will not be the final villain. Blackbeard will be. One of the main signs Luffy won't be fighting Imu in the final war is because Imu is already set up to be the villain of Elbaf. In fact, Luffy is on his way up to fight Imu directly right now in this arc. This is really strange, because we know of course it's extremely unlikely that Luffy will actually defeat Imu for good in Elbaf, but it does seem like Luffy is going to have a significant battle with Imu here. And Oda never ever does this. He never gives Luffy the same arc boss in multiple arcs. Oda has of course had Luffy fight the same villain multiple times in a given arc, but he never writes two story arcs where the final opponent for Luffy is the same. This is because generally a story arc's conflict and themes are centered around its main villain. And in Elbaf's case, it really seems like this is the arc that Oda crafted for Imu to have his time as the main villain. I mean, right from the start, the opening Legoland story of this arc was a metaphor about this evil ruler that controlled this world that he created as an all-powerful, all-controlling god, thematically setting the stage for this being an arc about fighting against Imu. The perpetrator of Elbaf's central tragedy, the beloved King Harold's death, turned out to be Imu. The primary villain of the Rock's flashback also turned out to be Imu. And Luffy's main enemy of this arc seems like it's going to be Imu as well. As such, Elbaf actually seems to be the arc that Oda is writing around Imu as the primary villain, which would make sense if Imu is going to be upstaged by Blackbeard as the main villain in the final war arc. It reminds me of how, even though Wano is about defeating both Kaido and Big Mom, Kaido ultimately has the role of the main villain of the storyline that Luffy fights in the final battle, while Big Mom is defeated in the penultimate battle by an alliance of side characters. And it was the preceding arc, Whole Cake Island, where Big Mom got to be the main villain and have her personal conflict with Luffy. Now look, at the end of the day, I know this is not absolute reasoning. Just because Oda doesn't repeat arc villains for Luffy doesn't mean that Oda can't change that pattern this late in the story. Maybe Imu will be the main villain for Luffy in back-to-back story arcs. However, what also stands out is that Luffy's personal narrative for being the one to defeat Imu simply is not as strong as the three children of God Valley. As we know, Dragon's entire storyline is literally him spearheading the war to defeat the Celestial Dragons. He devoted his entire life to this. The battle against the Celestial Dragons is far more personal for Dragon than it is for Luffy. Similarly with Blackbeard, now we know that the original rebel against the Celestial Dragons and the previous archenemy of Imu, even before Dragon, was Blackbeard's father, Rox. And now we know that the actual destined showdown between the Davy clan and Imu has been centuries in the making. As such, it now becomes very likely that Blackbeard's story as the one Davy clan member who got away from God Valley and who grew up with the single-minded mission to one day avenge his clan and defeat Imu will come into play. And finally, Shanks' story has turned out to be deeply tied to the Celestial Dragons as well, as the one Celestial Dragon who essentially turned against his own, supposedly a child of destiny. And most importantly, Oda himself has revealed on multiple occasions that Shanks plays a role in the final saga that is comparable in significance to Luffy himself. And since we know that Shanks won't be defeating Blackbeard, that suggests that Shanks' role will be against the Celestial Dragons, aka Imu. In comparison to these three characters, there simply isn't as much of a connection for Luffy to Imu, not on a personal level or even on a broader level in terms of enmity with the Celestial Dragons in general. That arguably doesn't matter, as Luffy's overarching role is to be a warrior of liberation. There are countless storylines where Luffy doesn't have as much of a personal connection to the villain and the conflict as other characters, but Luffy still saves the day anyway, as that is his role. However, in this case, in the final saga, things are set up somewhat differently, in that Luffy actually can still play that role, but in a manner that actually completes Luffy's own journey, and gives him a far more personal battle, while still letting side characters also get a big win. If the trio defeat Imu, then this completes their storylines very well and allows them to play a major role in freeing the world, but it also naturally segues into Blackbeard stealing Imu's fruit and supplanting Imu as the true, even greater villain, and even more all-consuming darkness that threatens to swallow the world, who now only Luffy can defeat. This is interestingly, in fact, remarkably similar storytelling to what happened at Marineford, the conclusion of Act 1 of One Piece, where initially the arc seemed like it was all a battle to defeat the world government, but then at the climax, Blackbeard emerged as an even greater threat and positioned himself as the ultimate villain. Now at Marineford, as we were only at the halfway point of the narrative, Oda put a pin in that for the time being, essentially establishing that Blackbeard was getting ahead of himself. However, I wouldn't be surprised if this foreshadows how the final arc of the story will play out, with what starts out as a battle against the Celestial Dragons transitioning into Blackbeard completing his master plan to become the even bigger bad. After Imu's defeat, Blackbeard can seize Imu's fruit, the missing mythical Zoan that would complete Blackbeard's trifecta of the strongest Logia, the strongest Paramecia, and the strongest Zoan, and Blackbeard could now truly emerge as the greatest villain, even greater than Imu, setting the stage for Luffy to arrive and defeat Blackbeard when literally no one else can stand up to him at that point anymore. And in doing so, everything comes together for Luffy. He completes both his narrative role and his personal journey. Luffy completes his narrative role in the sense that he liberates the world, tearing down the ultimate embodiment of darkness to bring the dawn. And Luffy completes his own journey in the sense that he defeats his arch-enemy and his greatest pirate counterpart to finally become the king of the pirates. I feel like this narrative flow fulfills every character's needs more cleanly, and considering we will already get to see Luffy vs. Imu and Elbaf, there wouldn't be a sense of missing out on a Luffy vs. Imu matchup. In fact, this sequence of events even sets up narrative space for Luffy vs. Akainu beforehand, as I believe that this is the matchup that Luffy will be occupied with while the Alliance fights Imu, though I elaborate on that in more detail on my podcast. But now you might be asking, how could Dragon, Shanks, and Blackbeard even defeat Imu if Oda already showed us that 6 legends combined couldn't do the job? I believe the simple answer is that the modern-day Alliance will have tools that the old generation simply didn't. The biggest advantage, of course, being Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi. While Imu is very, very powerful, of course, I think readers may be getting a little ahead of themselves when judging his abilities, as the greatest challenge when fighting Imu is ultimately his regeneration, or really what we can assume is his immortality, as has been strongly implied on multiple occasions by Oda. Imu is the recipient of the immortality surgery, hence he can basically take any damage and recover. This is likely why Rocks believed 2 fruits were needed to combat Imu. One of them was likely the Yami Yami no Mi, as the Yami Yami no Mi can negate other Devil Fruit effects, and Imu's immortality is a Devil Fruit effect. It stems from the Ope Ope no Mi. That's also likely why Blackbeard's entire plan hinged on him getting the Yami Yami no Mi above all else. He didn't even start the rest of his plan until he got that, as his whole mission would be impossible without this fruit. In fact, Blackbeard was ready to give up on his dream until he finally got the Yami Yami no Mi. I believe this fruit will be the key to the Alliance ultimately being able to kill Imu, and it may also be the key to them being able to damage Imu with their attacks in general. But beyond the Yami Yami no Mi, as we've seen, in straight combat, it's actually not out of the question for a high-level Haki fighter to be able to fight Imu directly. As we saw, Rocks could actually hold his own one-on-one with Imu just fine. The problem was really dealing lasting damage. Rocks could just keep on cutting Imu over and over into pieces, but Imu was still able to survive. As such, Haki monsters like Shanks or Dragon should be able to do a decent job fighting Imu directly, assuming that they will actually be able to deal lasting damage to Imu thanks to the Yami Yami no Mi's assistance. And in particular, we also saw that the only reason that Rocks ultimately fell to Imu was because Imu is able to Dami reverse his opponents if he can catch them them with one of his tendrils. Shanks would be one of the absolute best equipped characters in One Piece to fight Imu directly without getting caught by this, as Shanks has been shown to be an unparalleled Future Sight user. Whereas Rocks likely couldn't use Future Sight in this moment due to his agitated emotional state, as Future Sight can only be used when the user is calm, I don't think Shanks will have that same problem, as Shanks is generally portrayed as one of the most emotionally controlled characters in One Piece, even able to use Future Sight while his friends' lives were being threatened. And finally, as for Dragon, the reality is that his abilities are an absolute enigma right now. But one thing does seem extremely likely, which is that he has some extraordinarily powerful Devil Fruit. And Dragon is also practically guaranteed to be one of the strongest Haki users in One Piece as well. We have no guarantees what Dragon's fruit could bring to the table, or what a combination of his Haki and his fruit could bring to the table, but one thing that I find very interesting is that we have had two notable parallel villains to Imu in the past before, Enel and Doflamingo, and in both of these storylines, there was a figure who was at the center of the plan to overthrow them, who had been working on this plan for decades, and both of these figures had a certain ace up their sleeves that they were able to successfully use on God that almost actually finished the job in both cases, Wiper with the rejectile and Law with his gamma knife. In both cases, Enel and Doflamingo seem to have been put down, until both of them were able to almost miraculously revive themselves from the brink of death through their Devil Fruit abilities. I would not be surprised if Dragon has a similar ace up his sleeve that could be pivotal to the battle, though much like his predecessors, I don't think Dragon himself will ultimately be able to kill Imu. I think Blackbeard will be the one to finally seal the deal, and subsequently capitalize on stealing Imu's ability. I actually have a theory that Oda may have already hinted at what Dragon could have up his sleeve, but for time's sake, I'm saving that for my podcast as well. And after hearing all this, you might still be saying no, Morge, even if today's characters have some advantages that would make the battle against Imu different from how it was in the past, the three of them still shouldn't be enough to defeat Imu. And here's the thing, I think it's entirely possible that it's not just these three. I think we could see 4 or maybe even 5 characters coming together to defeat Imu. All I'm saying is that these 3 will definitely be involved, as all 3 of their stories seem to be leading back to Imu. I think it's entirely possible that Mihawk could be in there as another top tier fighter. Or alternatively, we know that Zoro very often ends up getting included in these big team showdowns against the final boss. I wouldn't be surprised if Zoro is thrown in against Imu as well. Or maybe even Law, as the original user of the Ope Ope no Mi, will have some clutch role in undoing Imu's immortality operation that even Blackbeard can't do. There are many possible candidates for joining this battle, but these 3 are simply the ones whose destinies seem penciled in for sure. So how does this battle conclude all of their storylines perfectly? But before we get into it, the bosses are here. This month you can get our brand new collection, the Boss Poster Collection. 15 dynamically illustrated One Piece villains, 15 hidden iconic moments. Get Cunning Crocodile with a hidden Straw Hat Alabasta send-off. Get Vicious Rob Lucci with a hidden Jet Gatling. Or Yonko Blackbeard with a hidden Crossroads of Fate. And many, many more. And this month, you can buy 2 posters and get any 2 posters free with the deal auto-applied at checkout. And here is the big news. If you get the buy 2 get 2 free deal, you also get a 3rd free bonus exclusive poster where you get to choose either Imu or Rocks. You can also pick up the entire collection at a massive bundle discount and get both Imu and Rocks for free. And to add a little extra, we are offering free worldwide shipping on all orders. Both Imu and Rocks are only available this month, and after this month, they'll never be available ever again. So get them before they go. And finally, if you want a shot at getting this entire collection for free, then just give us a follow on our brand new Instagram page, One Dream Studio. Everyone who follows our page is immediately entered into a giveaway where the winner will get the entire collection for free, so go follow us on Instagram right now. The winner will be announced on Monday, November 24th. Link in the description below. So first and foremost, we have Blackbeard. Blackbeard was always essentially a rags to riches story, with him first being introduced as a bum in a bar, and with us slowly realizing that he was on his ascent to becoming king of the world as Luffy's ultimate rival and dark counterpart. The further we go, the more weight we realize is behind this character's journey to the top, with it not just being his destiny, but his entire clan's destiny going all the way back to the Void Century to take back the throne from Imu. Considering Blackbeard's entire storyline seems to be heading towards him actually getting what he wants, even momentarily becoming king of the world, and considering the entire God Valley flashback basically framed Rocks, Blackbeard, and the Davy clan as the ultimate victims of Imu, the ones who most deserve vengeance, I do believe that Blackbeard is going to get it, and I do believe that's why Oda gave Blackbeard the one fruit that can counter Imu. I think by having Blackbeard be the one to finish Imu off and seize his ability and his throne, Oda completes Blackbeard's journey. He gives Blackbeard his well-deserved vengeance, but at the same time Blackbeard is shown as having become a bastardized version of the will of Davy in the process. So driven by revenge and ambition that he has become the very darkness that his father and his predecessors fought to overthrow. This also leads directly into Blackbeard killing Shanks, which is another event that readers have long believed is guaranteed to happen. Blackbeard, under ordinary circumstances, shouldn't be able to defeat Shanks, but after an extremely difficult battle against God, when everyone is exhausted, with Blackbeard then seizing God's power for himself to become the most powerful being on the planet, I think that moment of ascension being sealed off with Blackbeard killing his fated rival fits perfectly for both Blackbeard and Shanks. Shanks has always been destined to be killed by Blackbeard, but under these circumstances, Shanks' death would still do his character justice first. Shanks getting to shed his past as a celestial dragon by helping lead the fight in the war against them, all the way up to helping overthrow the king of the celestial dragons himself, would be something that satisfies all fans, and lives up to Oda's past statements about Shanks' role. And I think readers would be more okay with Shanks being killed by Blackbeard after Shanks is exhausted from already having played a pivotal role in defeating God. And finally, of course, we have Dragon. For Dragon, it simply would not be right for him to not get to play a major role in Imu's defeat. This is what this man has fought for his entire life, to end the reign of the Celestial Dragons. He absolutely has to be a part of the final battle to end their reign. After Dragon has done his part in defeating God, and then to his horror, he witnesses Blackbeard take over as a new, even more dangerous god, Dragon would then get to watch his own son rise up and take his place to finish the fight. In this vein, every major figure gets a fitting contribution to the end of One Piece, and Luffy still gets the last and most important battle. So let me know in the comments below if you believe Oda always planned for the God Valley trio of children to come together to defeat Imu in the final war. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear what I believe Dragon will be able to do against Imu, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon. Link in the description below.